Shalom and welcome to another edition of our Daily Bread. I'm Messianic Torah. And this week's Parashat is the third Parashat of the book of Vayikra, also called Leviticus, and it's called Shemini, which means eighth. And this week's Parashat, this is the third video of my message for 2014-15 called Should It Be Accepted? The first video was called Offerings for Glory, the last video was called Nadav and Avihu, and this one is called Kosher Eating. So I just take the whole message and instead of doing a long video, breaking it down into individual smaller videos. So the links are below. If you saw this one first, you can go back to the first one and watch them back, and there's a playlist link there to watch them in order as well. So this one is called Kosher Eating. And in the last one we talked about, in the first two we talked about how important following the pattern and the instructions were in order to get the presence of God to dwell with you. Then we talked about Nadav and Avihu and what happens if you did what was right and then you turn to doing what's wrong. And then now in this third video, we're going to talk about kosher eating because the kosher laws are in this week's parashat. And how that ties into this concept of should it be accepted. So kosher eating, this is, the whole thing's wrapped in this presence of YHWH, the glory of YHWH appearing. Will he dwell with his people? And what's required for him to do that? So kosher eating fits in perfectly with this. Because if our body is the temple, right, then a lot of times in the remez, your mouth can be like an altar, okay? Because it can be a place of bringing things before it to see if they're acceptable. And this whole concept of kosher eating is literally to have something come before you like you were the altar of God, and it's either going to be accepted or it's going to be rejected and not accepted. This is this place of judgment, okay? This copper altar, and copper is a model of judgment. And so what we see here is that we see that with the kosher laws, you're supposed to observe it and decide whether or not, depending on what category it falls in, whether or not it's acceptable or not. If it's acceptable, you take it in. You eat it. It becomes part of you. If it's unacceptable, you don't. Your mouth stays shut. You don't mess with it. You leave it alone. You stay away from it. And this teaches us a lot of things, because if what comes, just like we saw in the opening thing, they needed to present the offerings for the glory of YHWH to dwell among them. If they didn't do the offerings first, if what they brought to them in form of offering was not acceptable, if it was not a calf for the sin offering, for Aharon, and if the people's sin offering wasn't there, and if the consecrations and burnt offering, if all that stuff wasn't done according to the pattern, then God wasn't going to dwell there. The glory's not going to appear, okay, in the tabernacle. And it's the same way. If you're eating something, and you're eating something that's unclean, right, what's it call it? Most of them, it calls them an abomination. Okay? Abomination, right, drives away the presence of God, right? Like the abomination of desolation makes desolate, the abomination that makes desolate, it makes it empty. There's nothing there. If the tabernacle is unclean and been defiled, then it has to be cleansed before YHWH will dwell in. Well, in the beginning we learned that the commandments are part of both the offerings and the sin offering and all that. There's all these submodels and layers of a repeating thing, right? You have to have the sin offering before you're going to be able to cleanse and purify it. Okay, and Aharon had to have his offering before he could offer the people. So he had to be made clean so he can make these people clean. Even among themselves, they have the sin offering, and then they're going to have a burnt offering, and they're going to have other offerings, but it starts with the sin offering. Because you got to be made cleansed first to do the next phase. There's an order to things. And so in the same way, with kosher eating, there's an order to things. if you eat an abomination, then I don't think the presence of YHWH is going to dwell, or God is going to dwell with people who are eating unclean things. I just don't think so. You know, I mean, He can dwell wherever He wants, but I just can look at the pattern, right? God doesn't change, and I don't think if it hasn't been cleansed, and I don't think if it's been defiled, and if there's been an abomination, it makes desolation. So what we eat matters. Because people, you know, there's the old saying, you are what you eat. Okay? So if you're eating unclean things, and you're unclean, and then people who are unclean are saying, oh, God's dwelling with me. You know? Oh, I have the Holy Spirit. Oh, I you know, they say all kind of stuff. Oh, God told me this and that. Well, it'd be weird for God to tell you to start a ministry when you're going out and eating unclean food at restaurants. You know, I've seen people. They're going out to eat food that is going to be unclean. Even if they think they're ordering the right food, they're ordering things that are cooked in the same pans with unclean food, and ingredients in the food that they're eating are also unclean, aside from the utensils and the things that they're touching and all of that would also defile them. There's tons of ways. These same people might be the person in front of your congregation who, you know, have all these titles and all of this, and they're going out to eat at unclean restaurants. Then they're going to teach you about God. You know? And it's not saying if what they're saying, you know, anybody can teach a piece of truth, but it doesn't mean that they really have a deep understanding of truth. Or they might only know some things. See, the thing is, you don't take on the whole package. Because the fact is one of the rarest things that I see is people who really pay attention and try and eat kosher. Like even among Messianics. Most of the Messianics that I know are pretty lax on their kosher eating. And they're going out to restaurants and they're doing this and that, and it's, you know, they're cooking with dishes and stuff that they've had for a long time and that are unclean or that are porous and they didn't know which ingredients were or weren't kosher, so they've probably been defiled along the way. Not aware of ingredients that are unkosher. They're cooking in ovens that aren't kosher. You know, there's tons of stuff, you know, that they're unaware of or sloppy with, and they just don't think it's a big deal. And I think, to me, it's like your body's like an antenna. If you want to get good reception, you eat kosher and you pay attention to what you're putting in your body, because that's becoming part of you. It's not like you can just get rid of that really quickly. And, you know, it becomes literally part of you. And you know, so it's something that you should be very careful about, and for the base nature of the fact that you want to you don't want to make yourself unclean to where you need your relationship with God. And the cleaner you are, I believe, the closer that, you know, at least you have the ability for God to dwell with you and engage with you more, in my opinion. I mean, most people are you know, it's not that you have to be perfect, though that should be the goal, you know, because I think that God, you know, has the ability to and does wonderful things among His people. But I think, why would you want to stifle that by eating unclean? And, you know, the eating laws, just like the first sin, are such a funny one, because that's where sin started. Over Adam being told, don't eat this particular fruit from this particular tree. The sin of eating, why? Because at our core, it's a hunger, it's a desire, a basic desire we have. I'm hungry, I want to eat. Well, what's more important, your hunger or God's laws and God's commandments? You know, anyone can say when they're not hungry, yeah, sure, I'll obey. But the hunger is part of the test. Now you're in want. So when you were full, usually I think God tests us in both those areas. He'll test you when you're full, and when you have plenty. Riches can be a test, and when you have nothing, you'll be tested. What's it going to take to get you to disobey God? Is it going to be wealth? Is it going to be poverty? Is it going to be being full, and when, as it says, when you've eaten and you're full, you'll forget me? Or will it be in your want, when you say, oh, I'm so hungry, I guess I'll just eat that ham sandwich, that's all they have at the store, and I'm hungry. I don't know. Could be whatever, but you're probably going to be tested in both directions to make sure that you actually are obeying God's law. So when it comes to kosher eating, there's so few that actually keep it. I mean, there's a lot. Most people just don't. And this is one of those important things about, should it be accepted? It's right before you. You're hungry. Should it be accepted? That's what this message is. Here, he gives you an outline of what to look for. And it's your job to diligently figure out whether the things before you are kosher. I can tell you right now, if you're eating out at restaurants, you're most likely not eating kosher. I don't care if you order a piece of bread or what you order. When you've worked in a restaurant, you'll understand how much cross-contamination is going on back there. The guy you order a piece of bread, he just put pepperoni on a pizza or made a ham sandwich, and it doesn't matter if he's wearing gloves or not, and ham grease is still on there, then he's grabbing your piece of bread and putting it on your thing. I can tell you right now, aside from all the ingredients that most people don't even understand aren't kosher, aside from all the pans and cross-contamination, and I'm going to make him put a new glove on, and I'm going to watch him, make sure he doesn't touch anything else. Good for you. You weren't there an hour earlier when the guy who was slicing that stuff sliced the ham and has all the ham's juice on there, and then sliced your chicken and turkey on the same thing without wiping it down. You haven't been there all day. You didn't see the guy who's picking up the ham and reaching over that container of turkey, and ham juice is dripping all in it. You didn't see any of that, and you don't know, and you'd rather not know. Fact is, you're probably not eating kosher. And so if you want to, then you gotta kind of live a little differently and plan a little bit differently and better. So that's dwelling, right? That's your dwelling place. You're preparing a dwelling place, a habitation for God. And kosher eating is about looking at things and saying, what's good? What should be allowed to come into the temple? Okay? People talk about, they're a watchman. Everybody's out there trying to say, this guy's a false teacher. I have to say that because, I'm a watchman on the wall. You know what they're not a watchman on the wall with? What goes in their mouth. Be that watchman. Don't worry about who's a false teacher and who this and that is, things you wouldn't understand. Start just basically with the basics of food. What should go in your mouth? Be that watchman. And what shouldn't. Till next time, I'm going to say shalom. Leave a comment, subscribe, hit the like button for us, and let us know what you think. And the next video in this series, the last one's called Uzzah and David in the Presence. And the link's below. And if you didn't see the first videos, you can start back over and see those as well. Till next time, I'm going to say shalom.